My slides are visible, right?
Yes, sir.
So we were analyzing the situation. Newton's second law, force equal to mass into acceleration, right? How acceleration, how mass is defined, and how the forces are defined. So when we talked about the force, it turned out that there are two types of forces, body forces and surface forces, right? And when you talk about the mass into acceleration, so mass is m, acceleration is dv by dt. Now, what is this dv by dt? So from the definition of Reynolds transport theorem, some variable which is changing, which you call as a kind of momentum, right? Now, if you do that, then what happens? Then if you replace mv, then the right hand side becomes this particular thing becomes something like this. And then if you have all the forces, that is this is equal to nothing but summation of all the forces that you write here, that becomes something like this at the bottom, whatever it is written. Now, what is a body force? Body force is a force which changes with the mass, correct? So say suppose Earth has a lesser amount of gravitational force than Sun. The reason is that Earth has a lesser amount of mass, and Sun has larger amount of mass. So mass has a big correlation with the those forces which change with the size of the or the mass of the object. That particular force is called the body force. Whereas what are the surface forces? Surface forces are the forces which are acting on the surfaces, like stresses. Achha. I just ask you a question. Say suppose you have a parameter called force per unit area. I say that force per unit area. What is this parameter?
Surface tension.
Force per unit area.
Stress.
Somebody has said pressure.
Pressure, yes.
And somebody has said stress. So what is that? Whether it is a pressure, whether it is stress.
Sir, pressure is normal stress. It acts perpendicular to the area of contact.
So
If tangential, then stress.
If it is tangential, then stress. If it is normal, then it is pressure.
Pressure.
Sure. First of all, force is a vector or a scalar or a tensor?
Vector.
Force is a vector. Area is a vector or a scalar or a tensor?
Vector.
Area is also a vector. So force by area is what? Whether it's a scalar, vector, or a second order tensor.
Tensors.
Why?
Because we can decompose in a total of 9 components.
F can be decomposed in 3 directions, and A can also be decomposed in 3 directions.
So 3 into 3, 9.
So total 9 components are there, right? Total 9 components are there, right? And 3 means 3 different directions. Like say, suppose if I look at XX. So it is in the X direction. And what is the area? So force is in this direction. This is the force, that is Fxx. On what? On which plane?
X-plane.
The plane which is normal to the XX. See, when I say F by A, sometimes you will see people will write F by A perpendicular. F by A parallel. This is the way people will write. So this force This is the force that you are applying here. This is the force that you are applying here. On which plane? The plane which is perpendicular to the x-axis direction. How do I define x-axis direction? Let me just show you how do we define x-axis direction. So first, I have an origin. I have a reference frame with respect to an origin. So I have one axis, I have the other axis. Okay, so suppose this is my x-axis, suppose this is my y-axis, suppose this is my z-axis. Okay, this is alongside an origin, which is my 0, 0, 0 part. This is the place where things are all 0, 0, 0. Okay, this is the place where the things are all 0, 0, 0. And then I have x, y, and z. Now, what is x-axis? This is x-axis. What is xy? This is xy. And what is xz? This is xz, right? Similarly, you can have different directions here. So this is yy, this is yz, this is yx. Similarly, you can write this as, you can further decompose this in three different directions. So this is what? This is zz, this is zy, and this is zx. What am I doing here? What am I doing here? Say suppose you have fx, fy, fz. So f is a vector. It is decomposed into, say, suppose I have applied this force F, okay, which has this F is nothing but like, Fx, Fy, Fz. Now it is possible to apply Fx in three different planes. It is possible to apply x in three different planes. One is the plane that is perpendicular, and one is the plane that is parallel. That is parallel. Say if I go back to the presentation, so you may see that, in the presentation, you may find that this particular force is acting perpendicular to this area. So this is a normal force, right? This is F by a perpendicular. Okay, whereas this particular force is acting, this is Fx, but acting on the same area, which is perpendicular to xx, but in the direction of y. Whereas this in the direction of z. So immediately you can understand that this Fx, it is possible to apply Fx on the plane which is perpendicular to that in three different ways. One is perpendicular and the other two are the parallel. In this direction it is parallel, in this direction this is parallel. So essentially this is called the normal stress, which is written here, and these two are called the shear or the tangential stresses. Right? So if I really look at a stress tensor, these are the terms which are, so sigma xx is operating on which plane? Sigma xx is operating on this yz plane. Sigma yy is operating on this xz plane. Whereas sigma zz is operating on the xy plane. It is perpendicular to the xy plane. Sigma yy is perpendicular to the sigma xz plane. Sigma xx is perpendicular to the yz plane, right? Whereas sigma xy and sigma xz are again acting as shear on the yz plane. Sigma yx and sigma yz are again, sigma yx and sigma yz are again acting on which plane? This is xz plane. And sigma zx and sigma zy are again acting on which plane? This plane is the xy plane. So these two are on the XY plane, which is all three are in the XY plane. These three are on what? These three will be in the XZ plane, and these three will be in what? These three will be acting on in which plane? That is YZ plane. So in YZ, these two are the shear, and this is the normal. On XZ, this is the normal. These two are the shear. In XY, this is the normal, and these two are the shear or tangential. So the summary of the whole story is that force is a vector, area is a vector. If you divide force by area, you develop a property called the tensor, which is called the stress tensor. Okay. Now in the stress tensor, you have the force in three different directions, area in three different directions. So you have three normal stresses and 6 tangential or shear stresses. Correct? Is it clear? What is F by A? Now you say somebody said that pressure. Somebody said that. Sir, force per unit area is also pressure is equal to force per unit area. Now, what is the correlation between this pressure and this stresses? Anybody has any idea?
Sir, sigma XX, sigma YY, and sigma ZZ are pressure components, whereas the rest of them are tangential stresses.
That is understood. That is clear. With the discussion for last 5 minutes, that is clear. But what is pressure? So I just put a sweeping statement here. 1/3 of sigma XX, sigma YY, sigma ZZ, we define as pressure. I just make a sweeping statement here. Later I prove it. Clear? So pressure is a, see, what is the property of a pressure? Pressure is a scalar or a vector? Or a tensor? What is that pressure?
Scalars.
Now force is a vector, area is a vector. How come pressure be a scalar? How do you measure pressure? You remember what is Pascal's experiment? What is the, say, suppose if you have a water column and you want to measure the pressure. How do you measure the pressure?
The rise, we use delta P equal to rho G delta H, and then we measure delta H.
You have a diaphragm, right? And that diaphragm, what you do, on that the hydrostatic head is pressing, and from there, you try to see what is the force on it, right? Say, suppose if you have a water column at a particular point, and you are measuring pressure from X direction, Y direction, Z direction, will it be different? Say you are putting the probe like this, you are putting the probe like that, you are putting the probe like that. In any direction you put the probe, but if the point of the probe is not varying, will the pressure be different? Yes, no?
No, sir, it's not very, I guess.
So why is that so? So one very interesting thing that you are coming up with for a particular point, if I calculate the pressure, that pressure will remain what? This will remain invariant. Okay. So I say that this invariant is defined like this. For the time being, you take the definition, and we are going to prove it as we progress that indeed pressure is 1/3 of sigma XX, sigma Y by sigma ZZ. For the time being, it is enough to progress. So any surface force you may define as a stress tensor like sigma Aj, and n dot dA you can understand the normal direction to which it is acting. So force is acting in this direction, and then the normal direction, and then what you are doing a surface integral. So all the forces to which it is acting normal, if you are taking a summation of that, that is what is the total surface force. So essentially, whatever forces are there, you are defining them as stress. And then you are doing a sigma dot n. So what is the operation here? Essentially, when you are doing sigma dot n, what you are doing, you can visualize this in this situation. What are the things that I'm adding? I'm adding with this one to this one to this one. So this is in this direction. This is the one normal force and these are the two tangential force. This is acting in the x direction. This one, and this one. These are the forces that are acting in the y direction. This will go to the y momentum. This will go to the x momentum. Okay, and this one, and this one. This is working in the z direction. So this will go to the z momentum. So what am I doing? I have a 3x3 matrix. Sigma ij, ei dyadic ej, and then I have nk ek. So ej, j and k is becoming equal. So in that process, you are having three momentum equations. The tensor is like, so you can see here, which are the ones that are acting in the same direction. So if you have the n matrix here, so you may see that, when you do the dot product, you will see that xx, yx, and zx. Xx, Yx, and Zx. These will be in one direction. Xy, Yy, Zy. That will be in the one direction. These are the y direction. And then Xz, Yz, and Zz. Xz, Yz, and Zz. These will be in y direction. So you are essentially clubbing them in order to get the total force or the total force vector. Now, say suppose if you are talking about summation of forces, you talk about summation of body force, summation of the surface forces. So essentially, you put rho g dv as the body force, sigma dot nda as the surface force, and you have two such surface integral. You have two such surface integrals. One is coming from the acceleration and the other is coming from the total force. That can be converted into divergence. And if you just replace this in the total equation, you get the Cauchy's equation of motion, which comes out to be what? Which comes out to be the total derivative is equal to rho g and divergence of sigma ij. Okay, and we discussed that this has 10 unknowns. Even if we consider the stress tensor to be symmetric, so there are 6 unknowns, and you do not know rho, you do not know 3 velocity components, so you have got 10 unknowns. And from there, what you did, now you see that when you have the stress tensor, you differentiate this stress tensor into 2 parts. Okay, what are the differentiation that you do? You say that sigma is equal to what? Minus pi. So this is I'm writing in the dyadic form. Pi, which is I also in the dyadic form, plus tau. Whenever I'm writing this double bar, that means that is a matrix. So essentially what I'm saying, I can say that in 2 dimension, sigma xs, sigma xy, sigma yx, sigma yy is equal to minus p into 1, 0, 0, 1. P is a scalar, plus tau xx, tau xy, tau yx, tau yy. This is what I'm saying. This is what I'm writing here as a matrix equation with the matrix. Correct? Now, this is called the total stress. The total stress is divided into what? This is called the thermodynamic pressure. Okay, and this stress is called the deviatoric stress. So essentially, I take out what? This thermodynamic pressure, we have understood that this is what? This is an invariant. So what we say that the total stress has two components. One, which is constant, and the other is which is variable. And look at the Newton's genius. So what he said that this tau is equal to nothing but gradient of V plus gradient of tau is proportional to gradient of V, gradient of V transpose. This is what he proposed. In order to really have 4 equations and 4 unknowns from 10 equations, from 4 equations and 10 unknowns. So he proposed that consider this deviatoric stress to be what? Gradient of V, gradient of V transpose. You know, I'm writing this in a very cryptic manner. So what did he mean? He meant this. What did he mean? He meant this, that tau is proportional to gradient of V plus gradient of V transpose. So here, tau is a tensor, right? It's a second order tensor. What is gradient of V? What is gradient of V? Anybody? What is? This is also a second order tensor because vector and you have taken a dyadic product between these two. And the transpose of that also is a second order tensor. So how will it look like? If I write, say, suppose tau xx, how will it look like? Anybody has any idea?
Tau xx should be 2 times mu of.
So you write del u by del x plus del u by del x, right? And here the proportionality constant is replaced by, I'm not going into any complexity. I'm just coming from the fundamental. Here I have written proportional. So when you make it equal, you know, it comes out to be gradient of V plus gradient of V transpose, which is the Newton's law of viscosity. And these are also called the constitutive relations. So if you really look at the descriptions up to the Cauchy's equation of motion, say up to this point, you will find we did not really bring in the material aspects. Which material it is? There was no description that was there. But if you don't bring in the material aspect, what happens? You have 10 unknowns and 4 equations. So Newton thought that it is mandatory to bring in the material aspect to this deviatoric, because say suppose if you have a fluid, oil, if you have water, if you have a kind of biological fluid, tear or saliva, as the material changes, the stress strain property changes. So, you know, it is obvious that, you know, one should be looking forward to correlate this deviatoric stress to what? To the viscosity and gradient of V and gradient of V transpose. Okay, so this is the parameter proportionality constant, which has a unit of Pascal second, is known as the dynamic viscosity. So how does it look like if I just, say if I write tau by j is equal to mu, gradient of u means del vi by del vj, right? Gradient means what? Gradient means, when I write gradient of V means del Vj del Xi, right? Or del Vi del Xj, right? So del Vi by del Xj plus del Vj by del Xi. This means both has Ei dyadic Ej, and here also you can say that this is nothing but tau Ij is Ei dyadic Ej. All of you are with me when I'm converting this to the initial notation. What is that? Tau Ij Ei dyadic Ej is what? Mu into del Vi by del Xj Ei dyadic Ej, okay, plus del Vj by del Xi Ei dyadic Ej, right? All of you are with me. This is the way things can be expanded. Essentially, this is also a matrix. Essentially, this is also a matrix with 9 components, and 9 components, right? Am I correct? Any confusion here up to this point? No? Okay. So let us see how do we go about that. So what am I saying? That tau Ij, I just shorten the notation. Del Vi del Xj and del Vj by del Xi, right? So what is tau Xx? Mu into del U del X plus del U del X, right? So that gives me what? 2 mu del U del X. So what will be my tau Iy? Anybody? What will be my tau Iy?
2 mu dou V dou Y.
Del V by del Y.
Yes, del V.
What will be my tau ZZ?
2 mu del W del Z.
Right. So what is my tau XY? Equal to tau Yx equal to what? Mu into
Del U del Y plus del V del X.
plus del V del X. Okay. What is my tau YZ equal to tau ZY equal to mu into
Del W del Y plus del V del W.
right? And then tau XZ equal to tau ZX equal to mu into
Del U del Z plus del W del X.
So essentially these are the, so you can see here, these are all the normal terms. U is changing with respect to X, V is changing with respect to Y, W is changing with respect to Z. Whereas here, X, Y, so U is changing with respect to, so X directional is changing with respect to Y, Y direction is changing with respect to X. That's the reason they are not getting added. Now, if you summarize the whole thing in the form of a matrix, the matrix will look like this. So what you did, you said that sigma ij is one part which is constant, invariant, which holds the thermodynamic pressure. The second part is the deviatoric part, where tau is proportional to what? The tau is proportional to somewhere it is written. Maybe later somewhere or previously somewhere Newton's law written. Anyways, so tau is proportional to what? Tau is proportional to 2 mu into Eij. This is where you are saying that tau is what? Tau is equal to 2 mu into epsilon ij. And what is this epsilon ij? Epsilon ij. So stress is proportional to here. What is this parameter called? This is, if this is deviatoric stress, what is this parameter called? Anybody has any idea? What is this parameter called? This is called?
A strain, sir. A strain.
No, it is called strain rate. In case of a solid, this will be strain. In case of a Newton's law of viscosity, this will be strain rate. Why? Del U, when you have only meter, Y is meter, that means this is unitless. When U is velocity, meter by meter second. So because of that second, the terminology strain rate comes into picture. So stress is proportional to the deviatoric stress is proportional to the strain rate. So sigma ij becomes what? So I say this is Pi, right? P into the identity matrix. Right. So if you do that, it will come like this. Whereas deviatoric stress, just now I have written these things. 2 mu del V del Y, 2 mu del W del Z. And these are the cross terms, which you will see. These two will be equal. These two will be equal. And these two will be equal. So you may see that in that process, you have really differentiated the pressure, and at the same time, you have converted all the 6 variables of stresses in the form of velocity. So essentially, you have the unknown of pressure and 3 velocity components, which you put back into the Cauchy's equation to get what? The Navier-Stokes equation, where in this place you have for the first time introduced the material description. Up to this point, you did not differentiate between materials. Density is not a major factor of differentiating the materials, whereas viscosity is a property which is a material specific property, like oil, like water. Okay, different types of viscosities, different types of materials will have different types of viscosities. So how many equations are these in this one? There are 3 equations. How many equation is there? There is only 1 equation. How many variables? Pressure and 3 velocities. So essentially, you have 4 equations and 4 unknown. Now this is a solvable equation. This is also called the Navier-Stokes equation, right? You people have derived this, right? Have you submitted as an assignment? Yes, no. People are submitting assignment or not?
Yes, sir. But few are not submitting, others are regularly, like 10, 11, 12 people.
Just drop me an email who are not submitting, okay?
Okay, sir.
So did I give this assignment that starting from Cauchy's equation, you put Newton's law of viscosity and then get this Navier-Stokes equation? Did I give this assignment previously?
Yes, sir.
So did you submit? Did you get this?
I have done it. I'll submit it after class.
Yeah. So submit this as an assignment. This is an interesting equation. Okay. Now to give you a challenge, there is no analytical solution of this equation. Okay. The analytical solution of this equation is yet to arrive. The mathematician or the physicist or the engineer who is going to provide the solution of this equation, analytical solution of this equation, that person is going to get the Fields Medal for sure. And Fields Medal, you have to start early, because Fields Medal you have to get by 40. It is not like Nobel Prize, any age you can get it. Fields Medal is like, the Nobel Prize of maths. Na, why mathematicians are not given the Nobel Prize? How many of you know that?
Yes, sir.
What is the reason?
Apparently, I heard that Nobel did not consider mathematicians should be given Nobel Prize, as it does not require some.
No. Why is that so? Do you know the real reason?
No, sir. I heard that maths is abstract.
No, Nobel's wife ran away with a mathematician.
I heard this, but I thought it's a rumor.
No, not a rumor. It's a reality. And to take revenge, he took revenge on all the mathematician community. So mathematicians don't get Nobel Prize, but their best is the Fields Medal. Okay, so if somebody is analytically solving, numerically this has been solved. So entire computational fluid dynamics is solution of these Navier-Stokes equations. By the way, you just remember this is written equations. That means it's a set of equations. Never write Navier-Stokes equation. And Stokes is a scientist and Navier is a scientist. Okay. Navier developed the Stokes equation is this part, whereas Navier integrated this part. So it goes with both the scientists. If you leave apart this Newton's law of viscosity, this part, the separate part without this red part, is called the Euler's equation. And these equations of motions were stopped for about 150 years before Newton introduced this concept and bring this equation so that it can be comprehensively solved, which has been culminated by the Navier and Stokes. These are the two scientists who developed this set of equations, and numerical solution only came late 90s. Before that, even people used to solve using only simplifying these equations to using some analytical techniques, which we will try today. But this, in its complete form, there is no solution available analytical until today. So that's a news for you. Now, if I open it up, it will look like this. So this is my local acceleration. This is my convective acceleration. This is the pressure gradient. This is the x-directional gravity. And this is the x-directional viscous forces, right? So this is the y momentum, again, local acceleration, convective acceleration, pressure gradient, gravity, viscosity. This is the z momentum, again, local acceleration, convective acceleration, pressure gradient, gravity and viscosity. By the way, what type of equation is this? Is it an algebraic equation, partial differential equation? What type of equation is this?
Partial differential equations.
Why?
Because it involves partial derivatives.
What are the dependent variables and what are the independent variables?
The dependent variables are pressure and the velocity components. U, V,
WP, these are the dependent variables, right?
Yes, sir.
And what are the independent variables?
X, Y, Z, and T.
X, Y, Z, and T. So whenever you have multiple independent variables, that's where you bring in the concept of the partial differential equations, right? Multiple independent variables operating on multiple dependent variables. Correct? What type of partial differential equation is this? Linear or nonlinear? These are linear or nonlinear equations?
Non-linear.
How do you know? What is the source of which term is the source of nonlinearity?
So del square by del x square, these are second order terms.
No.
Sir, there is multiplication of this dependent and the differential of the dependent, like u del u.
Yes. Any dependent variable and its derivative, it is multiplied. So all these terms, these are the nonlinear. These are the source of nonlinearity. Okay. These are the source of nonlinearity. These are the source of nonlinearity. So if you drop this equation become a linear equation. Okay, what is the order of this equation?
Second order.
Second order in space, first order in time.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this is a second order in space, first order in time, non-linear, coupled partial differential equation. Right? So first order in time, highest order in terms of time, and second order in space, highest order in terms of space. Correct? And nonlinearity coming from these 9 terms, okay, which is in tensorial form, we write V dot gradient of P. Right? This is the term which is leading to nonlinearity. Let us see how exactly these things are. So it's a typical linear ODE, right? So similarly, this is the generic framework of a PD. It's a second order generic PD in space. Now, if this is a second order PD, then in this situation, all these coefficients that are there, no, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, if I can write B square minus 4AC is greater than 0, that is called a hyperbolic. If the B square minus 4AC is equal to 0, that is called a parabolic equation. If it is B square minus 4AC is less than 0, that is called an elliptic equation. Now, that has nothing to do with hyperbola, parabola, or ellipse. Right? It is just about the way the correlation comes. That's the way it has. This correlation is taken from conic section, and it has been imposed on these equations, right? And from there, this has been derived, right? So suppose, you take this equation, okay, and say here, I evaluate B square minus 4AC for this equation. Can you evaluate? What will be B square minus 4AC for this equation? This one.
-4.
That means?
It's a hyperbolic.
That means what? -4 means what? Less than 0, right?
Yes, sir.
So what is that?
Yes, it's elliptic.
So this equation is called the elliptic equation, okay? So if you have a partial differential equation like this, what is the name of this equation, by the way? Anybody has any idea?
Laplace equation.
So Laplace equation is what? It is an elliptic partial differential equation. Okay. Similarly, if you are doing this, say del phi by del t alpha del square phi by del x square, if you just do this ABC business, so you will find this is a parabolic equation. You do del square phi by del t square c square del square phi by del x square. This is a kind of hyperbolic equation. So just to cut the long story short, if I bring in all these properties here, so del u by del t, say suppose I strike out all the terms, rho del u by del t is equal to mu del square u by del x square. What type of equation will be that? See, I just strike out everything from here and I go for rho into del u by del t is equal to mu into del square u by del x square. What type of equation is this?
Parabolic.
This will be a parabolic equation, right? Now, say suppose I strike out all these terms. All are 0. This is 0. This is 0. This is 0. What type of equation is this? अरे अभी तो किया ये क्या है mu into del square u equal to 0, right? What is this?
Elliptic, sir.
This is a Laplace equation, right?
Yes, sir.
This is an elliptic equation, right? And these are the terms, these nonlinear terms, including this. This is the hyperbolic term. Okay, so this one with this one makes a combination of parabolic nature. This one with this one makes it a hyperbolic nature. And only this one gives it a elliptic nature. So essentially the entire Navier-Stokes equations has what? Entire Navier-Stokes equation has what? All the three elliptic, parabolic, and hyperbolic properties. So partial differential wise, you have a solution, analytical solution for elliptic equation. You have an analytical solution for parabolic equation. You have an analytical solution for hyperbolic equation. But if you combine them to a Navier-Stokes equation, you don't have a solution. Why? Because now you have to bring in all the three aspects, and that is the reason why it is so difficult to solve. So say as we have derived this for a very arbitrary geometry, so this will be applicable for a missile, okay, for a car, for a microfluidic channel, okay, for a cell, everywhere, this equation will be valid. Only the thing that I need to change, the conditions, the initial conditions and boundary conditions. Okay, So to solve this equation, how many initial and boundary conditions do I need? Anybody has any idea? First, how many variables are there? How many independent variables are there? Say X, Y, Z, and T, right? And how many dependent variables are there? U, V, W, and P. So how many initial conditions and boundary conditions necessary to solve this problem?
So 3 initial conditions for UV and W.
Specify one by one. You specify.
Sir, we will need 3 initial conditions for UV and W.
Right. So for this, you need 3 initial conditions, right? Okay, then
We will need
for this, how many you need?
2 boundary conditions for
2 plus 2 plus 2, right?
6.
6 here, 6 here, and 6 here. So total 18 plus 3, 21 conditions you require, right? And what about this?
3. We will need 1 for X, 1 for Y, and 1 for Z.
So total another 3, that is total 24. 3 initial conditions and 21 boundary conditions you require in order to solve these equations. Okay. So introduction to PD, classification of PD, right? Conversion of, you submit this, how this become parabolic. This is an assignment. How Navier-Stokes become equation has hyperbolic property. These two are the submission. So essentially, this is true for a Stokes flow, very low speed flow, microfluidics. We are going to encounter these equations very frequently. This is for a transient flow, unsteady flows, for this sort of equations we'll see. And this is for this type of equation is true for, is required. Generally, these terms are treated in case of high speed flows, when there is a convection dominated flow. Typically in microfluidics, you avoid the hyperbolic, flows. So if I just summarize the whole thing, you may see that this term is the local acceleration, this term is the convective acceleration, these are the pressure gradients, this is the viscosity. Okay, say suppose if you have a pipe flow, plate flow, okay, plate flow with impulsively started, plate flow with boundary layer, aerofoil, pipe, cylinder. So you may just see that this particular table summarizes that which term will be important in which case. Why am I doing all these things? Because I know that in its completeness, I cannot solve it. So I have to be smart in just knocking off a few terms. Say suppose for a pipe flow, I can just safely knock off. In a microfluidic flow, I can safely knock off these 2 terms. So if these 2 terms are right, it will be much easier for me to get a solution, analytical solution, and I can go away with that. Say for a plate impulsively started, I just need these 2 terms. I don't need these 2 terms. So I just drop them, and then I have a simpler mathematical framework to solve the problem. Right. So that's the way over a period of time until late 90s when computer started picking up, and then people went for computational fluid dynamics where you can really solve these equations. So these are done analytically, and I'm going to show you some of the examples, like how is that they are done analytically. We are going to derive this. Say suppose in case of a pipe flow, a flow through a channel. So you drop these terms. So in only the right hand side remains. We are going to derive this just to see that, if I have this sort of equation, I will have a solution, analytical solution like this, which will give me this parabolic profile of the fluid flow inside the pipe. Similarly, for the impulsively started flat plate, okay, I have the equation for what? I have the equation for this and that, which you may see will be taken here. And that as a solution like this, correct? So one can really see that a viscous flow can be elliptic and parabolic. Elliptic when it is steady, parabolic when it is unsteady. Inviscid flow, it can be elliptic when it is subsonic, unsteady it is hyperbolic. So different types of partial differential combinations can be really evaluated based on the type of flow, and then you reduce the equations, and from there you go for a solution. Correct? So, this is one very interesting way of handling the problem. When you are really in a fix that you cannot solve the problem in its entirety. So let us attempt how we go about that. How exactly it is done, in a sense that in a sense that solving the problem. This is the derivation that is done just by the differential volume element, right? Up to the point I have done everything using this tensorial notation, right? So I just request, these 2 slides, what you do on your own and submit as an assignment. Okay, so this slide and the next slide. So you are basically, this is what I wanted you to derive, that starting from the Newton's law, then doing a differential analysis over a control volume, you accumulate all the forces, viscous forces, all the gravitational forces, and then come up with the set of Navier-Stokes equations, in the form of this vectorial form. Okay, so please submit this as an assignment. So we take a simple situation, which is a very common situation in the microfluidic channel, that you have the bottom plate, which is stationary. You have a bottom plate, which is a fixed plate. This particular plate is a fixed plate. This is stationary. This plate is a moving plate. So essentially you have a fixed plate at the bottom. You have a top plate, which is moving, which is sliding in this direction. And then in the middle, you have a fluid. Here you have a fluid. So question is that what will be the flow profile here? Okay. Now I have the equations. Now what I do, I attempt to make sure that it is given to me that the velocity of the plate is v. This is my x and y direction, and density and viscosity rho and mu, and this height is h. Okay. So let us attempt what exactly will be my flow profile. So now you see, I will start taking very smart assumptions. What is my system? Let me just repeat the whole thing here, because then things will be much easier. So first I have a system like this. This is a fixed plate. Okay, and then there is a plate which is moving at a velocity v. Okay, this is my height h, right? And then I have a fluid which has a viscosity and density of mu and rho. Okay, and this is a fixed plate. So first assumption, what I do, I say that this is a 2D. Okay, so suppose this is Z and this is X. So is it taken X and Z or what? Let me just check once. X momentum, Y momentum, Z momentum. Right, so it is taken as X and Y later. So let us go for this is X and this is Y. It doesn't matter. You can take also Z. Then what I do, so first assumption what I do, it is 2D. Second assumption what I do, it is steady state. That means any variable related to time, del U, del T, del V, del T, okay, del W, del T, they tend to be 0. Then what I do, I say that the fluid is moving like this. It's a parallel flow. So there is no cross flow. So V is equal to 0. Then what I do, I assume that rho is constant. This tau is equal to mu gradient of V plus gradient of V transpose, Newtonian. Laminar means low speed, so that left-hand side terms can be omitted, and the properties this rho and mu are constant. There is no pressure gradient also. I don't make the flow just by pumping it. I just making the flow. So del P by del X, del P by del Z, all these things will be 0. All are 0. So no pressure gradient. Right, so you see the way I'm simplifying. 2D W equal to 0, del Z equal to 0, and gravity is acting in this direction minus Y direction. If this is Y, so gravity is acting in this direction. Bottom plate, I know that U equal to 0, that means a no slip boundary condition. V equal to 0, that means an impermeability boundary condition. And W is obviously 0, it's a 2-dimensional flow. While in the top plate, I have V equal to 0, W equal to, but U, I have an X directional velocity as V. Now, if I do that, then you see that, now here if I start looking at my continuity equation, W is already 0. Okay, now what is del V by del Y? So parallel flow, I have assumed there is no V, so that is also 0. So that gives me del U by del X equal to 0. So from continuity, I get del U by del X equal to 0. Now let me see the X momentum equation. Del U by del T equal to 0. Why? Number 2, it is steady state. Del U by del X, this is coming from continuity. Del U by del Y, V is equal to 0. That's why equal to 0, W equal to 0. So this is equal to 0. So the left hand side whole equal to 0. Okay, there is no pressure gradient. This one is 0. X direction, there is no gravity, that is 0. Okay, del square U by del X square, this is coming from continuity, it is 0. Del square U by del Z square, this is 2D, so this is also 0. So only term that survives from X momentum is del square U by del Y square equal to 0. Similarly, if I look at the Y momentum, what I see that, this is an error here, by the way. This should be del P by del Z. Okay. So you just, the way we are doing it, you do it by del P by del Y is equal to. So here you just, put this to be 0 and Y will be rho GY, right? This is in the minus Y direction. You put this to be 0. This is to be 0. Now here, again, this is steady state. Del V by del X, V equal to 0. Del V by del Y, these two are 0. W is equal to 0. So all these terms are 0. Del P by del Y, in the Y direction, this survives. And then del P by del Y is equal to what? Del P by del Y is equal to minus of this. So that means this will be equal to rho GY. This is in the minus Y direction, right? If it is in the minus Y direction, this will be minus. So this will be del P by del Y is equal to minus rho GY. And then V equal to 0, V equal to 0, V equal to 0. So all the three terms are 0. So this will be the modification here. And del P by del Z in the Z direction, this goes off. So everything will be 0, just like it has happened for Y. So now, just to regularize, since these nodes are a bit consistent, you just consider that this to be X and this to be Z for the time being. I'm just changing the gear a little bit because there is a discrepancy in the node. So X momentum comes out to Y, d square U. So you now see that I am just, silently changing del square U by del Y square into what? D square U by dy square, because I have only one variable here. One independent variable, one dependent variable. So it comes out to an ordinary differential equation, which has a solution of U equal to what? C1Z, C1Y plus C2, right? So there is this discrepancy is there in terms of the notations. Just, rectify that in your case. I just don't rectify them just to see that whether you are following them or not. So in this case, this will be C1Z plus C2 if this is Z, right? And then what happens? Then you have P equal to rho GZ. When you differentiate it, rho GZ plus C3, right? Now, if you do that, then what happens? Then you get a velocity profile. Then what you do? You have to evaluate the two boundary conditions, C1 and C2. How do you do that? You have two boundary conditions. At this place, U equal to 0. At this place, U equal to V. You enforce those two boundary conditions. You straight away get U equal to Vy by H. Vy by H. So essentially, U equal to Vy. V is a constant velocity with which the plate is moving. Y is the what? Y is the coordinate system in the Z direction, in Y direction, in the vertical direction, and H is the height. So you may see that it will be a linear profile. And P equal to P0, P at Z equal to 0, P equal to P0. So from there you get the P equal to P0 plus rho GZ, which is the hydrostatic pressure head. That is the outcome of the Y. This is the outcome of the X momentum. This is the outcome of the Y momentum. Now, if you have X and Y momentum, you know everything. Now, what you do, if you get these things, if you really put back into the equations, you may find that, whatever you have obtained here, if you just plug back into Navier-Stokes equation, equations, you will find that everything continuity is equal to 0, x momentum is 0 equal to 0, right? And then if you want to really, what are the utility of this? This type of flow is called the, in the name of the scientist who first invented this, the name of this equation, that this type of flow is called the Couette flow. Okay, Couette flow means you have a surface which is fixed and you are trying to make a flow just by moving the one of the boundaries. This is called the Couette flow. So in this Couette flow, if you want to really know what is the force required in order to move the plate, what you need to do, you just replace this velocity profile. So you will get, you only have u, all VW are 0. So your stress tensor reduces to that, and from there you can calculate the force. Now you see the engineering utility of this equation after this much of analysis. This is about 250 years of research. After this much of analysis, you are able to calculate what? You are able to calculate. You really have a formula for a Couette flow that is correlating force to what? Area, velocity, viscosity, height. These are the engineering parameters that are measurable. You can measure the area. Say, suppose you have, in which sort of situation this sort of thing arrives. Couette flow generally arrives, say, suppose you have a piston, which is a stationary piston, right? And then you have an enclosure. Right, so suppose this enclosure is moving at a high speed and you have a stationary piston. So it is like this, or the enclosure is fixed, you are moving a piston in the middle, and then in the periphery, you have put a fluid, some sort of lubricant. Right, so you can see that, say this is stationary, say suppose this is stationary and this one is moving. If you have something in the fluid, so this part you can consider to be the Couette flow. And there you need to know what will be the energy that you require to really rotate this. How exactly these things are connected to the engineering problems. Why these calculations became so popular when during the French Revolution, when the Industrial Revolution took place across the globe. Because this gives you how much power do you need to rotate these shafts. From these calculations only you can go get the force. From the force you know the wattage, power requirement per unit time. Okay, and that wattage is going to really correlated with the energy that you require in order to really move these things. Right? And why viscosity, introduction of viscosity was an important concept here, because viscosity actually gave you the loss, the measure of the loss due to the friction. In Euler's equation, if you just drop out this term, in Euler's equation, if you just drop out this term, this is not going to give you the main losses associated with the friction. So your force calculation will be much more inaccurate in absence of these terms. And that's where, like, the Newton's geniuses came into the picture, where, essentially what you are looking for, that for an equation like this, if you get a velocity profile, you know everything about the situation. If you have a velocity profile, if you have derived velocity profile like this, you have the entire know-how of what is happening inside the fluid. So our target should be any complicated flow, any flow that is coming on the way. I have given you the simplest possible solution right now. I mean, this is the simplest possible system. You can imagine what happens in case of a serpentine microchannel. The truth is that after doing this calculation, the truth is that I just go back here. If I know the velocities, if I know the velocity profile, UVW velocity profile and pressure, I know what? I know the stresses because they are correlated to UVW, right? I know the stresses, I know the force, I know the pressure, everything that are associated with the system that need to be known. If I just know U, V, W, and P, I know inside out about the system. Any parameter that you want to evaluate from the system, I will be able to cook up using these parameters. I think the next example give you even more comprehensive picture. So this is a simple, like, a flow. I suggest, like, this whatever is derived here, no? You just, submit as an assignment so that, you are able to, like say, suppose here you see, they have calculated the wall shear stress also. So how much will be the wall shear stress? The force by area, right? So force they have replaced, and the area, from tau W, they are able to really calculate what is the wall shear stress. Wall shear stress is an important parameter. On the wall, what is the amount of friction that is ongoing, correct? So these two problems, all of you submit. This is another simple situation that there is an inclined surface. I'm just getting a little bit more complicated. And then there is a fluid that is flowing down. This is a very common microfluidic situation where, like, you develop a kind of flow profile. How do we solve the problem? Correct. So first I assume steady, then incompressible, that means rho constant. Okay, it's a two-dimensional, that means in Z direction it is 0. And then it's a fully developed flow. Fully developed flow means it is not developing. This profile is repeated. It has attained a velocity profile which is repeated. Right. So in that sort of situation, you can write del x to be 0. So del x to be 0, this is 0 from 4. This is 0 from 3. So del v by del y equal to 0. That is obvious from this equation. Correct. Now you will see these three are 0 from 1. Del u by del x 0 because del x is 0, fully developed flow. Del u by del y, del u v is equal to 0. Perhaps this is coming from 5, v equal to 0, that is 5, right? And w is equal to 0, that is 3. So in that process, if I just knock off this, everything, so the simple equation will come from what? So here you will see that gx is surviving because this is an inclined channel. So you can understand that G is acting in this direction. It's perpendicular direction, but I have taken the coordinate system X to be this direction, Y to be this direction. So there will be a Gx and there will be a Gy because it is acting in this direction. Because the gravity is acting in this direction, it will be having one component this direction and one component in that direction. So that is rho Gx and that is rho Gy. Right? Now, in that, you have this to be the profile related with friction. This is the most dominating one, and all other terms are 0. So you will see that this is your x momentum equation. If you integrate over it, you get what? What type of equation is this? Anybody has idea? What type of equation is this?
Parabolic equation.
It's a parabolic equation between u and y. Now, if you enforce the boundary condition, what are the boundary conditions that you are enforcing? At this place, u equal to 0, at x equal to 0, at y equal to 0, u equal to 0, at y equal to h, say del u by del x equal to 0. The gradient of velocity is equal to 0. So if you enforce, del u by del y equal to 0. If you put these two boundary conditions, so you get a parabolic profile. Now, moment you get u, what is shear stress? Tau by x equal to mu du dy. So you just differentiate, you get the shear stress. Moment you get the shear stress velocity, moment you get the velocity, you get the flow rate. This is the volumetric flow rate. What is volumetric flow rate? Volumetric flow rate is Q is equal to U dy. This is actually what you are doing with a measuring cylinder. Last day I explained the experiment that if there is a flow that is taking place in a pipe, you put a measuring cylinder, you collect per unit time for a while, that will be your, say, the volume that you collect divided by the time will be your volumetric flow rate. How does that happen? Say, suppose U is your average velocity, you multiply by dA and you take in surface integral of dA. This will be your U is meter, this is meter square divided by second. So this is your volumetric flow rate. You already know this is the velocity profile. So you put U here, you integrate over. So this comes out to be your volumetric flow rate. Right now, if you have volumetric flow rate, if you divide this by area, you get what? You get the average velocity. Right? If you differentiate this, du by du dy equal to 0. If you put du dy equal to 0, you get the U max. That means the maximum velocity. The maximum velocity at this particular point. So average velocity, maximum velocity, stress, force, all the parameters you can really obtain just by solving these equations. This is another example, like say suppose this is what I was talking about. Say suppose in the center you have a rigid surface and surrounding this is moving at a velocity omega. this sort of situation also, what you do, you say that now what you have taken r theta z. So you have taken the Navier-Stokes equations in the cylindrical coordinate. So you have given a transformation, you have taken in the cylindrical coordinate. Right? And in this situation, you have also given steady flow, rho constant, no flow variation in the z direction, circumferentially symmetric flow del del theta equal to 0. So if you enforce these conditions in the r component, z component, and theta component and z component, so you end up getting a very simple equation like this from continuity equation, a very simple equation like this from the theta equation, right? And then if you integrate over it, you get a very simple correlation with v theta. So you get the velocity profile, right? Now, if you get the velocity profile from v theta, you can calculate tau r theta, because moment you know the velocity, from there you get the stresses, and moment you get the stresses, from there you can calculate the force, planar, perpendicular, all the forces you can calculate, and then that will lead to the different types of velocity profiles, right? So I would suggest you to derive all these three. Another one which is not there in the SEA. Say suppose if you have a pipe flow, if you have a pipe and inside that there is a fluid and the fluid is making a parabolic profile, right? So that also is for a fully developed flow. So these four you submit as an assignment. Yeah, any question? Any question up to this point?
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, in the quiet flow, where in our assumptions we consider that pressure gradient is 0, but we are not striking off this del P del Y there. Sir, in the assumptions we are considering that pressure gradient is 0. But yeah, here del P del Y we are not considering it is 0.
Even pressure gradient is 0 in the x direction.
Okay.
See, you have to imagine the physical situation. If there is a pump, then you force the fluid in the x direction. Correct? Say, suppose if you have a pipe, if you are putting a pump, then only you have a pressure gradient in the x direction.
Yes, sir.
Whereas, even if you are not pumping it, there is a gravity in the y direction.
Yes.
So gradient 0 by what I meant, that in the x direction, you are putting the pressure gradient to be 0. You're not pumping, but then even if the flow is happening like this, you have a hydrostatic head here in the z direction. It may not be there also. You can ignore it also. In case of very thin slit pipe flows, people generally ignore because they have no influence. But this has no consequence in the flow profile, correct? This is a separate solution that you have got, that there is a hydrostatic head. That's why this is done. But this has no consequence here, right?
Yes.
Gravity has no consequence there. So these are two orthogonal functions, right?
Yes, sir.
So could I answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Any other question? Any other question? No questions? Yeah. No questions up to this point, because now things will start in the form of the solid mechanics, right? So up to this point, we were dealing about what? Dealing about the situation where stress is proportional to what? Strain rate, right? This is for a fluid, that is true. Correct. For a solid, what will happen? For a solid,
a stress is proportional to just a strain.
Strain, right? Now, how did you do in your what is the typical knowledge that you have, that stress is proportional to strain? In general, you consider this to be one-dimensional subjects, right? But right now, this will become sigma ij is proportional to what? Epsilon mn. Right? What is sigma ij? Sigma ij is a stress tensor with EI dyadic EJ, whereas epsilon mn is what? It is a strain tensor, that is EM dyadic En. Right? Now we have to really find out sigma ij. You can understand that it is a matrix like this. EMN, again, it will be a matrix like this. Now we have to find out the correlation between these two. And that is what? What is the name of this law? Somebody tells me.
Hooke's law, sir.
Right? By the way, Hooke's and Newton were more or less contemporary. Hooke's was a bit senior, Robert Hooke's, and he was almost near to inventing whatever Newton invented. So they are very much contemporary. Newton was a little bit junior than Hooke's. Right. So, and you can understand the person who can tell stress is proportional to strain, he should also be able to tell stress is proportional to strain rate. So entire solid mechanics, you can see that roams around Hooke's law, whereas entire fluid mechanics, it moves around. Rather, laws of the motion, that moves around Newton and his team in terms of the contributions. But before you understand the strain, one thing you have to really understand, that is called the relationship with the stress. By the way, this T is called the Cauchy stress. Okay, the relationship between that stress and this small t is called the traction. Okay, so you have to understand the relationship between T, which is a vector, it is a traction vector, and the stress, which is a cooked up quantity, that is the Cauchy stress. So stress is a quantity that we define, right? Whereas T is a quantity which is defined from the applied variables. I just wanted to include this in this particular lecture because this has a consequence with this, how this F by A is being converted to stress. It's a fundamental question, and I don't think the answer that I had given previously by F by A, considering this to be vector, that is correct. But if you look at this particular cartoon, it will be much more clearer that if you have a surface, and if you apply any force delta F in any arbitrary direction, where n is the normal to the differential surface, that is delta S. So you have applied this delta F to any arbitrary direction on the surface delta S, right, which has a normal n. Correct? Then we define the traction vector to be delta F by delta S, right? This is the way we define the traction vector. So K is a quantity which is small volume element, and we say that K tends to infinity. That means we accumulate all these together in the form of a point surface, right? And that way we define. So this is the way we start quantifying. Say suppose a surface force is acting. Say suppose I have this, I'm just trying to pull it on the surface. Correct. So the force that I'm applying on the surface, which has a normally name, this is also arbitrary. That is called the surface force delta F by delta S. Whereas body force, we define that same delta F, which is related to the body force, but by rho dV with respect to the per unit mass, mass per unit volume into delta V for all the small volume that we define as the body force vector B. So this is the most fundamental way of defining the traction vector and the body force vector. And the traction vector correlates to the stress. Like this traction T is nothing but N dot capital T. This we are going to prove with this Cauchy tetrahedron in the next class. Okay, so you will see that any arbitrary force that is acting on the surface, any arbitrary force that is acting on the volume. How are they defined as traction and body forces? And those traction forces, how are they directly correlated to the stress first? Okay, and from there, you know, if I have the Cauchy stress, and from there, if I just take the eigenvalues, and from the eigenvalues, if I really get, like, you know, the first invariant, second invariant, and third invariant of this stress tensor, how do I obtain the thermodynamic pressure, which is nothing but 1/3 of this T11, T22, and T33. This is where I started the lecture saying that, you know, you have a stress where you have the pressure and the deviatory part. So in the principal part, you have the first invariant IT in the left hand side top. You can see that this is sigma 1, sigma 2, and sigma 3. And then if you take a kind of, you know, average of that, from there you take this pressure out, and that pressure, if you just, you know, subtract from this Cauchy stress, you get the deviatory stress, and this becomes the thermodynamic pressure, which comes from the definition of the invariance, right? So in the next class, don't miss out the first part, because this is a very fundamental. There are two things that you should not miss out now. One is this, and then next we will be coming maybe the angular momentum equation, where we will put like how these are becoming symmetric. And this symmetry is originating from the angular momentum balance, right? So the origin of pressure, separation of pressure from the stress to define the deviatoric stress, correlation of the deviatoric stress with the constitutive relations like Newton's law, non-Newtonian fluid, and all these things, viscoelastic, and then connection with the elasticity, how solid, liquid, viscoelastic are treated under the same framework. And then use of the angular, this is up to this point we are discussing linear momentum, how angular momentum is embedded in this equation. Say suppose when I talk about this Newton's equation, I mean this equation, right? Say when this is symmetric, how angular momentum balance is already embedded into this equation. So that derivation we will do in the next class. Okay, so with this I close today. Any question you have? Any question you have?
Sir, in the limit which you take, limit k tends to infinity, what is the meaning of that k?
So say suppose, what is the meaning of a point? Say when the force is acting on a particular place, what do you mean by that particular, I mean, that point, how do you define that point?
Like we can take a small area and that contract that area to almost zero area in the limit.
How do you define that? You are saying you are defining it to zero, right?
Yes, sir.
You can also define like, you know, it's a very, very small area, but I keep integrating it for infinite number of times to get that point. See, when you say tends to zero means what? You know, this is a mindset, right? What do you mean by tends to zero?
It's becoming
you accept the argument when I say it is tends to zero, right?
Yes, sir.
You don't accept the arguments when I say that it is tends to infinity. You look at the definition, what does it say?
So like I don't understand.
Slide is visible, right?
Yes, sir. So I wanted to know what is k in this.
So now del F by del S is at k. Okay. Now this traction is acting on what? Is it acting on a particular point or on the entire surface?
Entire surface, sir.
Correct. But then it is operated at a particular point on the surface. Correct?
Yes, sir.
So k tends to infinity means I just accumulate all those.
Yes, sir.
Make sure
all such points.
Because if it is not infinity, then it is not zero also. I mean, it is not a point mass also. which has no existence, right?
Yes, sir.
Mathematically, that will be inconsistent. Say, suppose when you are doing, say, suppose body force, I'm saying that this N is that center of mass, right? But what is that center of mass? Is there any existence? It is zero, right? So if I need to accumulate all the body force, then what I need to do, I need to put N tends to infinity. Otherwise, it doesn't have any existence. Only when you see this, it has a gravity, right?
Yes, sir.
So if it is not there, it says, suppose I am saying that N is a point. That means it's non-existent. Point means what? It is non-existent. What is the geometry? What is the area? Nothing. Zero. So if I don't make it to infinity, what happens? My mathematics become inconsistent.
Yes, sir. To account for the whole surface, we are taking it to infinity.
But it is acting on a point mass. Point. Acting on a particular point, correct?
Yes, sir. So we are accounting for all such points.
So there is a compulsion that you have to make it tends to infinity. Otherwise, it doesn't work on the entire surface.
Yes, sir. Got it.
Yeah. Any other question? If not,